Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pressure BioSciences channel. Just want to let you guys know what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be running through company updates, industry updates, answering any questions you guys have during these. So if you have any, don't be afraid to send them over. And of course, we're going to be introducing members of the team. So who better to kick us off for video number one than President and Chief Executive Officer, Rick Schumacher. Rick, how are you doing today?
I'm well, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How I really like to start these out, right? So I like to paint a picture of your background, kind of build rapport with people a little bit. So first and foremost, tell us some of your previous successes and what really motivates you as a businessman and entrepreneur.
Sure. Well, I was thinking about going to medical school, graduating from undergraduate school, and I wasn't quite sure. So I was offered a position at Harvard Medical School to do research for a year. So I took that and I went to the medical area, and I worked for a year, ended up staying for 13. What I found out is that science is what I really like, but I really like science and business, combining them. And back when I was doing this, it was taboo to kind of combine science and business. So I spent a lot of my early years at Harvard Medical School doing research in infectious disease and a little bit of business on the side. But that changed around in the early 1980s when all of a sudden it was not taboo anymore for scientists in academia to get involved in business. So I was able to do a little bit of business under the umbrella of Harvard Medical School. And then I got bit by that entrepreneurial bug. And I said, I really want to do this full time. I don't want to go to medical school. What I really like is to build a business that's based on science that can do good. It can end up developing products that can help us all, leave the world a better place, as they say. And so I left Harvard after 13 years, and I started my first company called Boston Biomedica. The proverbial, I started it in my garage. I literally started in my garage. I rolled in centrifuges and laboratory benches, things that you really couldn't do nowadays. And I took the cars out of the two-car garage and built a little lab, and used that lab for about 3 or 4 months. I had an idea that there was a very big need in the area of testing for hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV/AIDS that was missing. And I had an idea of what could help to do that. And so I left to start this company. And I was able to take the top 5 people that worked for me at Harvard with me over a period of time. They didn't come to work in my garage. By that time, I had leased some space down the street about 3 months after I started. And the whole idea was to try to build a product line that would help ensure the accuracy. We hear a lot about COVID and COVID testing, and we hear about the false negatives and false positives, which are a serious problem. But they were even more serious a problem, in my opinion, when you talked about HIV, because you were testing the blood supply. And if you were getting false negatives and false positives, you could be transmitting the virus that caused hepatitis B, hepatitis C, or HIV to the recipients. And not just to one, but every unit of blood that gets donated goes to about 4.5 different people because you've got plasma and platelets and white cells and red cells, et cetera. And so I had this idea, and I started a company on it and named it Boston Biomedica. And I hired my first 5 people, and then we hired more. And I'm happy to say that I grew the company with the help of a lot of tremendous people to over 300. I started in 1986. In 1996, we took it public on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. We did it the old-fashioned way. I had a 2.5-week roadshow all over Europe and the U.S. And we raised the money we needed to start the company in earnest. And then over the next 10 years or so, we developed a number of products, and these products were sold all over the world. Basically, these products helped blood banks and hospitals reduce the number of false positives. And we also worked with the diagnostic companies developing the HIV, hepatitis B and C tests to help them reduce the number of false negatives. And therefore, the testing for these markers of infection became much better. So I'm very proud of that because there are tens of thousands of people alive and well over the last decade or two because these tests became better because they started to utilize the products that we were developing at Boston Biomedica. So we're a publicly traded company after 10 years on the NASDAQ. So I ran a publicly traded company, grew the company to 300 people. And at that point, we had two programs that were ongoing, one that dealt with pressure and using pressure in the laboratory, and the other one that dealt with a natural product that we thought had a good opportunity to be a fight against HIV/AIDS. And so it was decided we'd break up the company into pieces, and we did. We broke it up into 5 different pieces. I kept 2, and I kept 5 of my 300 people, and I started all over again. And I started by developing 2 companies. One was an anti-HIV drug discovery company called Panicos Pharmaceuticals. And a couple of years after I started that, we merged it with a public company, and we ended up taking over the majority of that public company. And Panicos, PANC, was a very high flyer, a wonderful company. And the stock went from pennies, Michael, to about $12 a share. So there's a good return on investment for the investors that came in. And that was in 2004, 5, and 6. After that was done, around 2006, I got serious about my second technology, which used pressure to control molecules in the lab. And so I started to focus on that part of my business. And we changed the name of the company to Pressure BioSciences. This is myself and about 5 people. And we changed it to Pressure BioSciences. And we started to focus on using pressure, particularly high pressure, to control molecules in the laboratory as a scientist. Why do we want to do this? Because when we want to run a reaction in the laboratory, we want to break open a cell to release those incredible molecules that are in there, the DNA, RNA, proteins, and lipids. If we want to inactivate a virus so we can work on it safely, if we want to try to find markers, biomarkers they're called, that will give us an indication of whether someone is infected or not, or recovering, whether a medicine is working, helping, then we need these markers. And so to do that, we needed to get a hold of the viruses and the bacteria and the cells and the cancer cells and test out these markers. So we use pressure, which had never really been used before. What we would do is to break open cells and to inactivate bacteria and viruses. We would use heat and cold and chemicals. All of those things work, but they have problems. They're expensive. Once you use them, you have to take them back out. You have to bring it back to normal temperature. Pressure moves at the speed of sound. Pressure is instantaneous, like turning on a light switch. But no one before we came along really understood how to control safely high pressure. So we learned how to do that. So we've developed a whole line of products that we can talk about at a different time that are using pressure to help people in the laboratories to break open cells and release DNA and RNA and study them. But then once you're done breaking them open, you flick the switch again and you're back to normal pressure, and you don't have all those extra chemicals or heat to worry about.
Wow.
So my background then is basically 13 years at Harvard Medical School as a scientist working in infectious disease, starting 3 companies. First one we talked about, Boston Biomedica, grew to 300 people, changed the way that blood is tested around the world, still being used products that I developed 30 years ago. The second is Pressure BioSciences, which is the company that I have now. The third is Panicos Pharmaceuticals, which was an anti-HIV drug discovery company, which was a very high flyer in the mid 2006 era. And then there's a fourth company called Trinity Biotech. I didn't do much, but I was recruited to help them part-time take the company public, an Irish diagnostic company that we took public in, I think, 1993. And it's still around. It's still around. It's still a public company. So I've had, my pedigree is basically 13 years as a scientist and 4 public companies.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's quite a pedigree, quite a portfolio of accomplishments you did there, Rick. So it's really interesting how you mentioned there was this taboo to start with. Let's go back to that point first. And now, I guess in my era of things, we really see private businesses pushing the envelope and improving lives in lots of ways. Could you have imagined, for instance, like obviously, like you said, medical and business don't really go together, and science and business don't go together, but now even space and private businesses go together. So it's really privatized. And do you think that's been a huge boon for multiple industries?
It is so different now, and I'm a bit envious of the young people coming out now that can do both. When I started at Harvard, I was literally told, Rick, you might get the feeling that you want to go into business, but if you go into business, you'll never get back in academia. It's something which is taboo and it's not done. And I was literally told my first 2 or 3 years at Harvard Medical School lab that I was working in, don't do it, because if you do, you'll never come back. But then in around early 1980s, it changed. Nobel Prize winners started companies. And all of a sudden it said, okay, as long as there's rules in place, you can mix business and science. There's nothing wrong with business science mixing. In fact, because of this, if we didn't, we'd have far fewer people in research, far fewer people in helping us develop the compounds and doing the actual research that's needed, because many of them would be just going right into business. But there's many of us that like to teach. There are many people I know that like to be on in the universities to bring along the next generation. And if they can, do something 10 or 20% of their time, which literally is now written in many professors' contracts, that they can spend 10 or 20% of their time working on business-related issues. I think it's fantastic, as long as there's a line there between, so that, as a scientist working in business, you need to declare whether or not you have a business interest in the company or perhaps the product that you're dealing with. But I think it's fantastic now. I think it's propelled science and propelled business at the same time. They can run parallel. So I think what was being done back in the 1970s and 80s and earlier was really inhibiting a lot of scientific progress. But now we can cross the gap here. I think it's a very good change in the business world.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for your insight on that. Like I said, from my perspective, that's kind of how things have always been. So it's interesting to see back on that. So I guess, Rick, let's bring it back to you a little bit. Let's talk about your role as CEO and president. Can you demystify that for people? Like, tell us what you handle on the day-to-day for the company, and like what you're in charge of.
Well, as they say, you're not a 9-to-5 guy person if you're starting your own company. So I have been a CEO of 4 companies, and all 4 publicly traded. I have the first company, I had 300 employees, and I'm a hands-on person. So my day back at Boston Biomedica with 300 people in 3 locations, about 100 people in each location, my day was coming in and sitting down and meeting with my direct reports that ran everything from finance and admin and HR and science and marketing and sales and regulatory. It kept going. And to be honest, it was a great learning experience for me, but it's not me. I'm a hands-on person. And so that's one of the reasons I decided way back when to break up Boston Biomedica and its 300 people and to start over with the 2 companies. So for some people, that's what they love. They love, being the person in charge and in managing that. That's not me. I'm hands-on. So where I am now with Pressure BioSciences is I'm hands-on. There's 14 of us, counting part-time people. Maybe there's 20 of us. And we all have to wear many hats. So this is a job where I come in every day. I don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing, which is great. I don't come in every day saying, okay, I've got 9 meetings set up with my 9 direct reports here. I'm coming in and it may be finance. I may be helping to raise money. I may be working with my investor relations people to make sure people like you, Michael, to make sure people understand what an amazing company we have and what an amazing future we have. Or I could be delving somewhat into the science. As an ex-scientist, I enjoy doing that, but I also know my limitations. I have some of the most astounding engineers and scientists I've ever worked with in my life at Pressure BioSciences. So there's no need for me to get in there. I get in there deep enough to know what they're doing and what they need so I can help support them. But it's not like the old days when I got in there trying to work the experiments and plan the experiments. I just need to know what's going on. And they bring me up to date a few times a week. And then I go out and find the things that they need. So my day is a motley crew of all different things that can happen, which actually excites me. I enjoy it very much. I enjoy finance. I enjoy investor relations. I enjoy marketing and sales. I enjoy science, of course. So with all these things going on, I can, from my experience, I can help my guys a bit, but they're the experts. I'm not. So the important thing is to get out of the way and let these phenomenal people do their job.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. That's one of the things that I've heard often from real quality CEOs. You surround yourself with people smarter than you in every field, right? It's not your job to know it all. It's your job to work with the people who do. And from there, it's also interesting how you described you prefer the smaller teams, kind of a smaller, when you're steering a smaller ship, you're kind of more in control. It's a lot more exciting, like you said. And you see that in a lot of entrepreneurs. So I guess, Rick, to kind of wrap things up for today, because I think you did a great job walking us through your past and your motivations. What are you most excited about with Pressure BioSciences for this year?
You know, Michael, if I could have planted a question and I wasn't asked to, that's probably one I would have asked to plant. We've been at this for 14 years. That's a long time. We started the company on the expectation that our first pressure technology platform was going to take the world by storm. It has done marvelous things, but it hasn't taken the world by storm because we are asking scientists to throw away their $6,000 machine and buy a $60,000 machine. And they're starting to do it, but it's a difficult sell, especially when money is tight. It's a difficult sell. But when you can find things that you can't find with that $6,000 machine, with ours, you find the money to do it. So it's a wonderful technology called pressure cycling technology, PCT, and we do have 225 customers, a who's who list all over the world that use this. But it's not something that a public company investor is going to wait that long for, because it's going to take a while for it to continue, and it's growing. It's going to take a while for it to grow to where it can be very profitable. The second technology, which we'll talk about down the road, is where we can help companies that are developing protein-based drugs get to market faster and a lot cheaper. And to fix problems with pressure that they have trouble fixing using chemicals and heat, which are often not good for therapeutics. But again, that's something which requires INDs to be approved, et cetera, down the road. So as much as that's going to really be a fantastic technology for us a few years from now, as we're growing it, it's not something that a public company investor is going to want to sit there and wait for the next few years. What I'm excited about is our third platform. It's called Ultra Shear Technology. We've been working on it for almost 5 years. We have $1 million we got from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which adds some credibility to it. We also have a full partnership with Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, which adds more. In case you know anybody from Ohio, Michael, I know you're from Ohio. So we're working with our friends at Ohio State because they've got one of the best colleges in the country dealing with food and beverage and agriculture. And in a nutshell, Ultra Shear Technology, we have 7 issued patents that 5 of them are in the last year or so. 2 of them are in the U.S. What we've done is we've combined high pressure with shearing or cutting, and we're able to, believe it or not, make oil go into water and stay in water. So in a 30-second nutshell, as the best example I can give, because I know a lot of your listeners, a lot of our potential investors are aware of the CBD market. But it's not just CBD, but CBD is in an oil. It comes out of the plant in an oil, just like astaxanthin, the most active and potent antioxidant in the world, just like vitamin D3, just like many, many drugs. 40 to 50% of all new drug candidates are in oil. But we're human beings. We're water-based. How do we get that active ingredient out of the oil? We have a method to do that. It's called Ultra Shear Technology. We take the oil that contains the active ingredient. We've built an instrument We break the oil into billions of nano-sized tiny little droplets. So we spread that active ingredient among billions of different particles of oil, and then it can be absorbed by the body. It's easier for the body to absorb the active ingredient out before we excrete the oil, which is what our body wants to do. So we make oil go into water. It has tremendous number of applications across pharmaceuticals, nutraceuticals, cosmetics, agriculture. Anywhere that oils are used, we can make that work much, much better. Excites me a little bit.
Yeah, well, Rick, I was gonna say you're an amazing CEO because I asked you what excited you and you excited me. So fantastic job on that. But Rick, again, I feel like we're gonna have a lot to talk about over the course of this series. So everybody, please stay tuned. And if you have any questions about any of this as we dive into it, don't be afraid to ask. We will happily answer it for you. But for now, Rick, thank you so much for your time today. Have a wonderful day.